As far as I'm concerned, if what you're saying isn't eliciting some kind of opposition, then you're probably not taking a stand. Hi, I am Ronald, the Rules Lawyer. This will be an entertaining one as I will be responding to some hostile comments to my recent video where I say that the boycott of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast is still on, and criticize Wizards for the lack of evidence that they're doing much of anything to address the concerns of Dungeon Masters in the new edition. First, to introduce myself, I am Ronald, the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who plays and runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. Support my Patreon. I do not make money as a left-wing activist political attorney. Look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen for more info. Supporting my Patreon gives you early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. First, I want to address the fact that I found out after recording and posting that video that D&D creators out there are accepting sponsorships for their videos covering the new edition, and some are also agreeing to exclusive sneak peeks with Hasbro to cover specific parts of the new edition. I disagree with that decision, and I don't think we should be doing that in the future. There is a boycott of Wizards of the Coast, and there are not many influencers who are using that word right now. However, the boycott is real. Many tabletop role-playing game players continue to carry it out. And the reasons are, I cover most of them in that video, briefly. Chris Cox is still in charge of Hasbro, and they still work with the notorious union-busting agency, the Pinkertons, which the US government has made illegal for itself to work with. They still haven't convinced that they won't aggressively monetize, and given what they tell their investors, to whom they are much more honest, there is no indication that they will decline to do so. Just because Wizards did not succeed this time doesn't mean they'll try to do it again or try something different. This wasn't the first time Wizards fucked up and made up with the community, and finally, we shouldn't have a near monopoly in the hobby. Now, to be clear, boycott for a YouTube creator does not mean not covering D&D. We can still cover it as journalists and critics. What it does mean is not entering into relationships with Wizards of the Coast. Things like sponsored videos or exclusive sneak peeks, we can cover the new edition of D&D without agreeing to these things. Given that Wizards of the Coast has proven it cannot be trusted and that it is an $8 billion company, it's very important that influencers avoid being influenced by it. And yes, it is true that entertainment journalists get free things from gaming companies all the time, but this is different from that. And full disclosure, I benefit from Paizo's program of providing free copies to influencers who have a certain audience size. So I get free physical books and PDFs of those books I choose to cover, which are the rule book books that they put out, which are about 3 or 4 a year. And I don't always remember to save this in my videos. I should, and I will try to do so in the future. Honestly, I forget because I get these books at the same time as everyone else. Also, they make clear that this is a blanket policy. Case in point, there was a video put out that was anti-Pathfinder, it criticized the system, put out by a large YouTube creator who announced he was leaving Pathfinder. And a Paizo developer said that this video, together with another one made by another large YouTube creator, significantly harmed Pathfinder's growth. However, Paizo made clear that it continued to extend its uniform policy to this creator if they wanted to continue receiving those copies, because he exceeded a certain audience size. So to be clear, what I'm disagreeing with here is different from that. This is not a journalist getting free stuff. And to use an analogy, if you are a critic of movies, we would be talking about free screenings of a movie. What I'm disagreeing with is taking money from Hasbro to sponsor a video covering a Hasbro product, or taking an exclusive for a video which increases the value and the prestige of your channel and that video. There's a difference between being a journalist who gets free stuff and entering into a mutually beneficial deal with Wizards of the Coast. And again, another occasion for full disclosure, I did benefit from the privilege of giving sneak previews of portions of a couple of Pathfinder books, Dark Archive in 2022 and Treasure Vault at the start of 2023. I have not been offered any sneak previews since, for Rage of Elements, for instance, in which other creators received those offers, but I didn't get one. But just as I think we should have a different attitude towards individual YouTube creators creating a living as we would towards Hasbro the mega corporation, I think it's fine to have a different policy and attitude towards tabletop role-playing game publishers who are not a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has lost the community's trust and is the subject of a boycott. I've also seen a couple of videos that describe saying that you like D&D 5e as a brave thing to do, that doing so puts you in a minority and makes you stigmatized. And I will say, as a person who has experienced marginalization on more than one front, that I don't buy it. It turns the world on its head. D&D 5e is by far the #1 tabletop role-playing game with a commensurately large audience, passionate audience. And criticizing the game naturally subjects you to a larger group of ardent opponents, as this video will show as I go through some of the hostile comments to my last video. One of the videos had the effect of painting people who recommend a different role-playing game system to someone who likes D&D 5e as being inappropriate. I cover this in my In Defense of Pathfinder advocacy video, but there are good ways to promote and say, hey, try out your system, and there are bad ways. There are ways of being an asshole. And I would say that the vast majority of people who recommend a system to somebody are not being assholes. One of the videos I saw, I think, exaggerated things and said that people who criticized creators for liking or playing D&D were committing a bigger sin than murder. That's an exaggeration. And that video also said that Wizards has gotten better, which I disagree with. We cannot trust Wizards. Before I go on to addressing the hostile comments, I want to address two shortcomings of my last video. First, I referred to a chart from subreddit stats that showed what looked like to be a significant drop in interest in the 1D&D playtest after they walked back on a lot of the experiments in their Unearthed Arcana articles. As it turns out, the statistics for all subreddits, it looks like, went down at that time, related to some unpopular and bad changes to the Reddit website that was the subject of a boycott, actually. So I can only merely point to my anecdotal experience, finding many commenters online saying that their enthusiasm deflated at that time with that announcement. The other shortcoming I want to address now, which is to show other ways to play tabletop role-playing games that you can play that doesn't involve spending money on Wizards of the Coast. And moreover, some of them experiment with new mechanics and rules that address some common complaints about D&D 5e, and which help illustrate my point in that video that Wizards of the Coast could have tried new things, but didn't with this edition. There is a vast design space, and I will preface my brief comments that I'll say about these systems with the fact that I haven't had a lot of time to deep dive into any one of them. What I'm about to say is based off of online discussions that I've read and lightly perusing the PDFs. First, if you want to continue playing a game that is similar to 5th edition or the new edition, which I call 5.5, there is Tales of the Valiant, which is being published by Cobalt Press, the respected third-party publisher that made many supplements for D&D 5th edition. What they have put out is quite similar to 5e and also makes tweaks and improvements. One of the things it introduces is a replacement for D&D Inspiration. Luck points are not redundant with advantage. Luck points you can earn when you fail an attack roll or saving throw, or when the Game Master decides to reward it. And the way you use them is that after you make a roll, you can spend luck points to increase that roll. This makes it more useful and also distinct from advantage. The other systems, in their own ways, try to appeal to the very large D&D 5e market. Level Up Advanced 5th edition, produced by EN World, came out a few years ago and addresses common complaints that D&D 5e doesn't offer much choice to martial characters or building your characters. It has more mechanical crunch, and its monster manual, called the Monstrous Menagerie, is seen by many as a strict upgrade to 5e's monster manual and actually works quite well in any game similar to D&D, Tales of the Valiant included. MCDM RPG is produced by the company led by Matt Colville and is in early development. Like all of these that are still in development, I've found some negative comments, but they're still in development. But there were some things that I liked about what I read about MCDM RPG. It clearly is Matt Colville's baby. He's someone who liked D&D 4th edition, and that influence is present here. It's notable for having no misses. When you attack a creature, you always hit. And in addition, you have some extra rider effect in addition to doing damage. You have what's essentially a standard action to do something like an attack, and a move action where you can either move or do some kind of maneuver that can help an ally or do something like grapple. It also addresses the adventuring day problem seen in D&D and Pathfinder, where you may run out of resources. There are two conflicting trends. You have a number of recoveries, which are like 4E healing surges to recover hit points that you can spend during the day. But at the same time, the more victories the party gets during that day through combat or other means, the more powerful you become. That was very popular in a lot of the playtest feedback. Megan jumped on my desk, of course. Next is Daggerheart, which is published by Darrington Press, which is affiliated with Critical Role. It takes inspiration from Fiction First games. There is no set initiative in combat. It's more like a conversation between the game master and the players. And we also have the concept of partial success, where you succeed at what you're doing, but there is a complication, which is reminiscent of Powered by the Apocalypse games that I really like. Some of the mechanics sounded a little clunky, however, and resources to track. I assume they're going to be listening to the feedback about that. Next is Shadow of the Weird Wizard, published by Robert Schwalb. I hope I am pronouncing it right, spelled S-C-H-W-A-L-B. They published Shadow of the Demon Lord, a very popular mid-weight alternative to D&D 5e that is often recommended by two people who play or GM D&D as an alternative that addresses some common complaints about D&D. This has rules that are a revised version of Shadow of the Demon Lord, but with a generic fantasy setting. Here we have, instead of advantage and disadvantage from D&D, we have boons and banes, which add or subtract dice to your die roll, and they can stack with each other. Also, instead of multiclassing, diversity is kind of inherent in character advancement. At level 3, you get to gain a new path, and at level 7, another new path, and there's like over 100 paths you can choose from. But these paths are designed to interlock with your base chassis. They aren't kind of accidental the way that multiclassing kind of works in D&D. Last is DC 20 RPG, which when this comes out is probably going to have a few more days to its Kickstarter. From what I've read, it takes cues from both D&D 5e and from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Like Pathfinder, it has action points. Instead of a 3-action system, you have 4 action points. Some things just cost more actions than others, and there are not different buckets of different action types. Significantly, you regain your action points at the end of your turn, and before your next turn, you can spend your points to do things on other people's turn. This seeks to address the problem of disengagement when it's not your turn. It also has a mana point system for spellcasting, where you spend mana to not only cast spells, but also make improvements on those spells. Alright, so on to the main show. Let's talk about the comments, the hostile ones to my video. First, I want to preface this by saying that the response to my video has been overwhelmingly positive. Granted, thumbs downs do not show up on YouTube, so this is kind of an overrepresentation, but 97% approval is not too shabby. Compare that to my takedown of the Illusion and Broken Promises of Bounded Accuracy, which had 95.1%. So for people concerned about my mental well-being, don't be. I'm just highlighting the very few negative comments because I thought they were kind of funny, and I wanted to respond to them. I thought it would be important to address them in a public space. My sin, if you could call it that, in my previous video was to be transparent. I made very clear that I oppose Wizards of the Coast, and I think that is, yes, the more important issue. At the same time, that does not mean that I wasn't honest in my review of the changes. I think my observations about this new edition can be taken on their own merits as well. I think that if 5.5e offered real improvements, especially for Dungeon Masters, that I would have given a more balanced assessment, two-sided assessment than I did in that video, and still say buy another game. I'm not saying that 5e is a bad system. It's a good system for some kinds of players, but if that's the case, I would say don't support Wizards of the Coast and find a game similar to it, or find a way to play it without spending your money on them. On the review part of my video, I don't think the main issue was, is it a good system for the over 80% of the market, I'm guessing? people who already like D&D 5th edition. They already like it. The issue for the new edition and what that audience is looking for with the new edition is what has been done to improve that game. And on that measure, there has been much to be desired. Sure, we've seen some buffs to player options and maybe some of the most broken things made less broken, but overall, that's all player facing. And their promotional videos are saying that you can use character options from the previous edition of D&D with the new rules. A very broad statement. Character options can be many things, including feats, spells, which will inevitably lead to new unforeseen broken combos that will be used by players and give new challenges to dungeon masters. And what we're hearing doesn't do nearly as much as what could have been done to address the common complaints that 5e players have about 5e. Any coverage of D&D needs to acknowledge the fact that there are other games besides D&D, and given that existence of other games, and given that D&D players are looking for improvements in the new edition, I think it's proper to focus on what does it do to change and improve the game. That should be the focus on coverage of D&D, and the issue here is Wizards of the Coast stagnation. All right, here we go. The first comment is, this video is pointless speculation. Well, the funny thing is that this person posted it 19 minutes after I posted it, and my video was 37 minutes long. So they didn't do much beyond see a few minutes of the video probably, and they speculated, and their comment was kind of pointless. Okay, for this next comment, I need to preface it by the fact that I, in that video, criticized Wizards of the Coast for not playtesting the Dungeon Master's Guide. We could have given them feedback on revised magic items, a workable economy including suggestions for prices, creature building guidelines, encounter building guidelines. But instead, their announced playtest, the promise of one, never materialized. Well, this commenter says, WOTC won't release the playtest for the new DMG until people have the new PHB, so they can playtest the changes with the new PHB. I get all of your whole deal, etc. But come on! The new DMG is completely different than the old one. You're not going to like it, because it's WOTC and D&D, and you only make these videos for rage bait, but come on, this is a joke! Well, if you know the release date of these books, the Player's Handbook comes out in September, and the Dungeon Master's Guide comes out in November. And anyone who knows production of physical books, of RPG books, knows it takes several months, probably at least 5 months, between sending the final PDF to print in probably China, then they get produced and get shipped over here. So it's not possible to playtest the DMG that way. This person was accusing me of jumping to conclusions when they are jumping to conclusions. And I think many of you will notice a trend here with some of these comments that one would hope in a hobby about playing games that people would not take criticism of Wizards of the Coast, the company we pay money to, personally, as if it were an insult to ourselves as people. We should be able to divorce criticism of a company from criticisms of ourselves, and people who levy criticism should also be aware of that distinction. I think that a number of these comments are disproportionate, to say the least. All right, this next comment comes from the opposite direction and says, Paizo isn't innocent here either. The remastered edition was a cash grab and causes compatibility issues with the previous edition. And if you don't have it in you to call out names, I will, and I'm going to black out the names. All independent devs or YouTubers that either spoke out against WOTC or was directly threatened by WOTC's vile OGL tactics, they all gladly slurped up the algo hits when it suited them to shit on WOTC, and now they have bent the knee and either are working directly with WOTC and D&D Beyond, or are going full hype mode for the WOTC cash grab books. And I'm sorry, you can't give them a pass with a "it's just business" mantra, and at the same time condemn WOTC for pulling a "it's just business" move themselves. And in the future, either have the spine to call out people directly, or maybe not say anything at all. Doing the sneaky "I won't name names" routine is just cowardly. And a little grandstanding here. Probably, if you believe in your cause, better for me to say what I say without naming names than to say nothing at all. And providing some context, Paizo remastered its game because of the OGL crisis and Wizards of the Coast, which forced all companies that relied on the OGL for their entire business model to have to pivot and protect themselves from potential legal action and injunctions from courts discontinuing all of their printed books. And the possibility, even if it's a small one, is dangerous for companies and could bring them under. They have much fewer resources to fight things out in court and cannot win a war of attrition with Hasbro. Also, you can't call it a cash grab when all of the rules are free online. Anyway, here's my written response. I disagree. I think it's completely fair and appropriate and right to have a different attitude and approach toward a multi-billion-dollar corporation than toward people who at most have modest small businesses, if even that, who to a degree rely financially on said corporation, full stop. This comment says that my video is unnecessarily critical in the not good sort of way. It does serve to condense your opinion on the handling of D&D's version updates. However, you don't have much concrete evidence to criticize on the validity of decisions yet. Much ado about nothing. Well, I would say that there is concrete evidence that I relied on in my video, one of them being that there was no playtest of the Dungeon Master's Guide. That is a fact. And I think it's fair to conclude from that they didn't really care about Dungeon Masters. At the time of that video, I hadn't seen much beyond the initial hour-long video and the fighter preview. But I don't think it's hasty at all, and any intellectually honest person would agree that if the process of making something shows you don't care about something, then the final product will probably not have that something. If the process to make something is shit, then the final product might be shit. And so this whole question, much ado about nothing, reminds me of the meme of the dog in the burning house. These next comments emphasize that Wizards of the Coast has taken some action. First, to be fair, the main issue at WOTC left at the end of April. This is referring to Cynthia Williams announcing that she's leaving. So at the moment, it's more of, are things going to change? The new set is all being released straight into Creative Commons, the new rules. And the elimination of a la carte purchases on D&D Beyond makes sense if they are now selling the books themselves. Remember, they lost Penguin as a distributor. Oh, and Cynthia Williams is gone, C.1, so how can you want her fired when she quit? The other comment is similar. It said, with regard to the implied assertion that a D&D boycott is in order because of WOTC behavior, particularly the undermonetized quote, Cynthia Williams is out. That happened on her watch. Okay. Cynthia Williams did say the quote about D&D being undermonetized, but she was right there under her boss, Chris Cox, CEO of all of Hasbro while she was president of Wizards of the Coast, on the same fireside chat at the end of 2022. She was not freelancing. That was Chris Cox's policy as well. And while I don't diminish the importance of Cynthia Williams leaving and the power that shows that the movement has had against Hasbro, are you really serious that you think that this means, because one person left, that Hasbro will not try to aggressively monetize the game? Is that really what you think? And am I the one jumping to conclusions? All right, this next comment says, this seems to be a really bad faith video. They have announced an overhaul of how magic items are presented in the DMG, including allusions to pricing and crafting rules. There's no way you watched and read about the 2024 core books and don't know that. Well, first of all, I did make a good faith effort before recording the video, actually, looking for a quote that I thought I had read somewhere that Jeremy Crawford said there would be prices for magic items in the new DMG, and I couldn't find it. Also, in the promotional video for the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is trying to sell the product, you would think that they would highlight improvements, mechanical improvements to the game that they're making for Dungeon Masters. And one would think that if there were improved guidelines for magic item prices and crafting, that we would hear a word about them, at least one word. Also, the phrasing allusions to pricing and crafting rules does not inspire confidence. The 5e 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide had pricing and crafting rules which were seen by the community as largely useless. Xanathar's Guide to Everything also said it would have guidance for crafting and introduced rules that the community has also found pretty useless too. Much of the problems and the assignments of rarity, for example, the price ranges were rooted in the Dungeon Master's Guide itself, and that was what was needed to be addressed. And that's when they're boasting that they're introducing new rules to assist DMs. But we're not hearing even that. I don't think this is a bad faith video at all. I think it's one that does not insist on putting blinders on myself. They continue. Also, the use potions as a bonus action homebrew rule is so ubiquitous that it's a common joke to say most people think it's baked into the rules. To say they got the idea purely from Baldur's Gate 3 is a wild take at best. I never said that. This is an issue of listening comprehension. I did not say that they got the idea from Baldur's Gate 3. I simply said that they decided to make it the official rule after Baldur's Gate 3's success, and they knew most players will be expecting this rule coming out of that experience. The fact that it was so ubiquitous among the community, in fact, only underscores how stupid it was for Wizards of the Coast not to include this rule that's commonly accepted in any of the playtest, quote-unquote, playtest documents to date, which would have been important to assessing any of the new class features that they were asking feedback on, which use bonus actions, for example. Well, anyway, pretending I said something that I didn't for debate purposes is what we call a straw man. All right, this next comment says, hilarious. Your first bullet point is boycott WOTC. Never mind they walked back the license issue. Cynthia Williams has left and added third-party content to D&D Beyond, just trying to relight a favor. Done with your channel, Ronald. Pretty obvious motivations. Biased commentary is easy to discern. Bold of you to assume that Wizards of the Coast has only done 3 horrible things. What I love here is the commentary that my supposedly biased commentary is easy to discern. Well, no shit, I put it in a bullet point. The fact that you disagree with boycotting WOTC doesn't necessarily mean that my comments about what we're seeing about the new edition are biased. And I think one would need to have blinders on to think that Wizards can be taken at their word. There is a famous saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And I think in the past 18 months, we've been fooled several times by Wizards of the Coast. So triple, quadruple shame on us if we believe them again. These next comments are kind of similar. This one says, you talk about boycotting WOTC while talking about the game on your channel to bring views. Seems hypocritical. The next one, it's kind of funny to me that you go on for like 5 minutes about boycotting D&D or whatever, and here you are making a 40-minute video that is probably monetized and making money of D&D content. We get it, you like Pathfinder 2e, you hate Wizards, yet here you are covering their content because it will make you money and is probably going to outperform your other videos. And here I think I'll just read my response. If you think you're being clever, you're not. Being silent about WOTC is clearly not going to do anything against them. This video is doing well because it's getting great engagement and many people want to hear criticisms of the market leader. So it's a win-win for people looking for this content, alternate systems for me and anyone who's not in WOTC's pocket. To which they responded, what do you mean silent? The entire community exploded about it. No one is being silent about it, LOL. If anything, this is what pushed me into Pathfinder 2e in the first place. I just find it kind of ironic you calling out other content creators for making videos on the new PHB when that's exactly what you're doing right now. And I think I'll just show my response. On the entire community having exploded about it already. The point is to fire Chris Cox and Williams and support unionization. Williams is out, now for the other demands. That's what matters, and that's what I measure my actions by, not whether I take an ascetic oath to never utter WOTC's name again. Morally equating my video criticizing WOTC and the PHB and telling people not to support it, and equating that to people who are hyping the PHB is insane. And in defense of this commenter, I think they genuinely had no concept what I was trying to do with the video and the real world I was trying to interact in. My video was not simply to convince people on the internet to play Pathfinder 2e, it was to counter harmful practices by the #1 company, and my entire audience is the entire TTRPG community, most of which plays D&D, and should be made aware of how to hold our companies who make our products to high standards. They respond, I don't think I ever equated you to someone who was hyping up the PHB. Okay, refer to the previous screen, you can see that they clearly did. My only morality issue is with you even bringing them up at all in the first place and talking about content you are supposed to be boycotting and then making money off of it. Again, real world. To have a boycott, you need to tell other people about a boycott so that we can act together as a group. I have a YouTube channel. Was I supposed to send emails or make phone calls or send postcards? And the last comment I've already addressed earlier in this video, and it's just a little expression of pettiness. All right, our next comment. 1 minute and 45 seconds in. First comment equals boycott. Okay, so you're a hater. You have nothing unbiased to say. No need to watch the other half an hour of your justification for your bias. Peep the fact you keep feeding off WOTC for content though. Just stick to Pathfinder if that's what you prefer. No need to crap on other RPG creators to feed yourself while trying to prevent them from eating. Okay, so let's take this one at a time. So you're a hater. Okay, so I'm a hater? Why does calling out the shitty practices of a company and calling for boycotting it offend you as a person? And feeding off of WOTC as if you're taking offense on WOTC's behalf. And they immediately jump to saying I have nothing unbiased to say. Supporting a boycott of WOTC's business practices shouldn't disqualify you from criticizing the new edition. It should not be a prerequisite to comment on the new edition to refrain from criticizing the company publishing it. A world in which the only reviews of D&D are by people who don't criticize the company is some kind of dystopia nightmare. Contrary to what this commenter believes, it's possible to have a different attitude towards a product as towards the company that makes the product and charges you for it. And on my supposed bias, I do wonder if this same commenter will also refuse to watch any videos that are sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. My guess is that this person calls something biased if they don't agree with it, and unbiased if they do agree with it. Just stick to Pathfinder if that's what you prefer. There's that pettiness, and make this D&D versus Pathfinder. And actually my response here is, that's not possible. Wizards of the Coast almost made it so that Pathfinder could not continue its existence. Wizards of the Coast, through the OGL scandal, threatened to eliminate Paizo as a company, as well as all third-party publishers who rely on the OGL. WOTC's actions affect the entire industry, and that underscores the importance of standing up to them. This is not about D&D versus Pathfinder. It's about workers and consumers not being screwed by a company. And I am preventing other RPG creators from eating? This comment is hysterical in all senses of the word. This commenter took things personally. All right, here's my response. There should be no neutrality when it comes to corporations firing workers and exploiting customers. If you think it's impossible to separate rules analysis from being critical of that, then Lord help you. You also decided to choose a side here, and it was not to accept any criticism of a corporation. I am not responsible for anyone starving, and that is an outlandish accusation. You're better off trusting people asserting independence from a corporation than not. And out of fairness, I'll show their response. Something about me being a hypocrite because I live in capitalism and buy products. This person was clearly upset by what I said, and to that I say good. This is precisely the kind of person I want to piss off. All right, some final thoughts, or actually one final thought. One underlying theme behind these comments is, I'm not a D&D creator. How dare you talk about something that's not your game? Well, I am a D&D creator. I have covered in depth the history of Dungeons & Dragons and also looked critically at its rules. I have played different editions of it, including 5e, and I have quite a bit of knowledge about it. There are many primarily D&D channels who also have voiced, rightly so, criticisms of Wizards of the Coast. We, as players of different games and different editions, have much more in common with each other than with the suits running things at Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. So that's it for now. Lastly, some YouTube creators and I, good friends that some of you who follow my channel will know, who did the Outlaws of Alkenstar campaign with me, we plan to do a video where we react to shitty takes, RPG takes on the internet. We all have a variety of preferences in our games. Tabletop Bro himself does not like Pathfinder and likes rules-light games, but we all are in agreement that WOTC is trash. However, we want help from the community for this video. We want people to submit comments from the internet that are worth reacting to. If you want to do that, then you should join my Discord. And I'm going to have a special channel there. It will be titled Funny RPG Comments. It will be located right below the ranting channel. Please submit screenshots of comments there as well as links to the original source so that someone on my Discord can compile them for our review. You'll also want to join my Discord because it's a great community where we talk Pathfinder 2e and other games. Lastly, like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, and also support my Patreon for ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time.